Hey, Riley Besties, welcome back to the Writing with Anna New podcast, where we talk about all things writing. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about some advice to my younger writer self. And I was kind of thinking about this, today, and what sort of advice I would give someone, especially myself, as I started to write and started to explore this sort of creative field, which is really interesting because I only really started writing really officially around 3, 4 years ago, I think. Definitely think 3 years ago is when I kind of started my first real book. But I have been writing for a long time. So I hope some of these things maybe help you if you're a beginner writer, or maybe you can just relate to me in this way. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Again, if you guys are on YouTube or watching my face, the quality is not going to be as good because I'm filming on my webcam. Can I speak? Because my phone is out of storage. I hate it when my phone gets out of storage. That little thing that pops up, and you try to take a photo. So annoying. And also, my camera right here is literally dead because I've been filming today. So sorry, you're gonna have to deal with this low quality. It's not that bad, okay? And if you don't like it, then just listen to the audio. But anyways, let's get on to this episode. Finally, sorry for the long intro, but let's get on to advice I'd give my young writer self. Okay, so first up, the first piece of advice I would give is to write what you want, but also keep in mind the realities of the world. And kind of what I mean by that is throughout my writing career, I kind of have, definitely my first project, Project BB, I definitely kept in mind, the sort of market, the book market, and sort of tropes that I wanted to include for the book to be marketable. And then as soon as I kind of worked on that book and pursued some other interests, I was just like, hold on, I want to actually write what I want. Not that that book is not what the book I wanted, but I was definitely pushing that sort of agenda when now I'm very much passionate about books that I want to write. But it's gone like the other way. It's like that, that swing is just really interesting because now I'm just like, okay, it's actually really hard to have a book published that is really different from the market because I've been querying Project Ghost for a month or so, over a month now, and I've not gotten barely any replies. And all the replies I've gotten, of course, are rejections. So really interesting, just the way that works, because I just want to shake my younger self and be like, yes, definitely write what you want, but definitely keep in mind, the potential, the book that will get you to, have your debut novel. Because, of course, at least it was a little bit more difficult for me because as I was getting into writing as a younger beginner writer, I was just not really sure if I wanted to be an author because, at least from my parents and from the world, I would just think, no, that's impossible. I won't be a writer. So I won't be an author because it's not a good career. I will never get it. Only if you're really lucky or really rich or really, I don't know, lucky, yeah. So that's why I kind of grew and I'm like, okay, wait, I actually really do want this. So I think in that growth, I would definitely just make sure and maybe just give some little advice about, definitely make sure you understand that the market is harsh. And of course, you can't really understand this until you get into querying and getting an agent and publishing and stuff like that. But I think definitely keeping that in mind that, writing what you want, but keep in mind the realities and the harshness of getting an agent, which is terrible to kind of think about as a younger writer, because you're just kind of trying to improve your craft. Really, you're not trying to focus on getting an agent. But that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Definitely, I think that's valid and almost harsh advice. So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is a bit different, and that is to read classics. Please read classics. I've recently gone into classics and I adore them. If you can kind of see, if you're watching my video, there's this shadow behind me and I have a big curtain, but I have all my classics lined up on my little shelf and I adore them with all of my heart. I think classics are just such a good way to get into literature and to understand pieces of work that is really different from the market right now. Because I think when you're beginning to write, of course, which I don't know, does this kind of contradict my first piece of advice, I don't know. But just like the classics are the classics for a reason. Like they're good pieces of work. So you need to read them and expose yourself. Even if you just try to read the way that they write, the sort of things they're talking about in the book, the sort of prose, the way that they're describing things, the dialogue. I think it's completely different from like modern literature, especially like fantasy, for example. Like the differences in not quality, more so quality in the writing, and how you really need to think when you're reading a classic for a reason, because today in society we get like spoon fed the stories and everything, like, oh my gosh, that's really noticeable, that's saying something about the social norms or critiquing this politic, whatever. You know what I mean? It's really hard to explain, but like with classics, you have to really think about it and put your mind in that sort of space, very intentionally, and that helps you kind of build your own creativity in a way that's meaningful. And it's really helped me understand, at least now, that I need to write books that actually have something to say. And when I think of classics, like The Clockwork Orange, like that is one of my favorite books at the moment that I've recently read, and like, wow, like that has a huge theme in it that is so deep. And I think now that I write my own stuff, it's kind of like, okay, what message do I want to come across in this book? So definitely just read classics. Sorry, that was a really long-winded explanation to that piece of advice. But let's get on to the next one. Okay, the next piece of advice is pretty self-explanatory, and this is to never, ever pants a book. Because I was a kind of a pantser as a beginner writer. I honestly think that to an extent, there is no such thing as a real pantser, because I think if you pants your first draft, really you're kind of just doing the zero draft. So I kind of consider myself a discovery plotter. Does that make sense? And I think the first real book that I came across and actually was writing is Project BB, which I've been pantsering for 2 years now. So that is obviously, and I think this is hard because I didn't actually know, as I was starting to write my actual, process in a way, because now I know exactly what efficient way I can, use to write a novel. And pantsering is not the way to go, because, for example, like a book that I had thought about for like around half a year to a year was Project Ghost. I plotted that in like a week, or basically a day, and then I actually wrote it in like a month. So like that sort of, process and having time to think about your full story in all its complexities and all its like full circle, in terms of the plot, the characters and everything, is really important before you even start a project. So I think never ever pants a project, because I'd always do that and I'll just burn out, because I would love starting first chapters and then I don't know what the heck the story I want to tell. So thinking about it is really important. And I think, of course, another little piece of advice to add on to that one that I just thought of and I hadn't put on this list is the fact that writing can also include thinking about your book, and you don't have to be physically writing words to be writing a book. Okay. So that's that. Okay, next piece of advice is to get closer to your characters. This is really important because characters are basically reasons, the reason why we write books. And I think getting close to your characters, understanding their psychology, what they mean for the book, what they mean to you, is really important. And it kind of sounds weird to spend time with your characters, but more so just spend time learning about them and speaking to them through the book. So as you're writing a particular scene, really think about the character. Like, don't just think about them as a character in your book, but think about them as a person in your life, if that makes sense, and a part of you. I think sometimes, especially in fantasy projects, with things being so, complex, it's kind of, easier to kind of fall into that sort of, that lack of I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, like that lack of relationship with your characters in a way. And I think it's really important to just spend time learning about what who your characters are through writing a book. And of course, you're like, yeah, how do you do that? Yeah, through writing your book. Write your book, and you'll know your characters and really think about, the little things, the little quirks, which are really, really important. And think about their philosophies, what they think about life, what their goals are, and stuff like that. So get close to your characters. Okay. 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 Next piece of advice. We got three more. The next one is you don't have to stick to the same genre. You don't have to stick to one genre. And I think definitely it is hard to say this because, again, with the whole debut, the whole getting an agent, it's really hard because you need to really stick in your lane in a way. But I think it's really important to also think about when you're starting, writing, to really do, experiment with different types of genres, because you don't know which one's your favorite, which one you're going to grow up with, which one really does speak to you. Because I was very much a fantasy writer. I still am. I still love fantasy a lot. But I kind of moved more into the literature, or like what's it called? There's my mind is not okay right now. Literary fiction? Is that? Yeah, that's the one. Literary fiction. So it's kind of like shifted in that way with particular projects and things that I'm interested in. And I honestly think I simply just grew up out of my fantasy phase. Not phase, but like, I really wanted to pursue this book. And I'm so glad that I did. And that book for me is Project Ghost, which is not fantasy. But yeah, I think it's really important to really just experiment and think about stuff that you want to write, and I think, I kind of got stuck in that because I was reading so much fantasy, and I really identified with being a fantasy, like, writer. But like, I think it's really important to know that you have so much scope. And I was just thinking about, for example, Leigh Bardugo, she has all these fantasy books, but then she came out with like a dark academia, which is Ninth House, and I think it's obviously easier when you get published and have like an agent and stuff like that. But as a beginner writer, again, don't stress out, man. Don't stress. Okay, last two. The next one is yeah. The next one is you need writing friends. Like, you literally need other people around you who write. I am so, so blessed to have met Tiana. I think in like my first year of really doing AuthorTube, she reached out to me to be on her like podcast, and we just hit it off, and she's like my best friend, and I simply really love her so much. So I think having writer friends really, it's just like this extra thing that makes such a huge difference. And whenever I have like problems, oh my gosh, even with like people who make content, like Tiana also makes content, and like being able to talk to someone who relates to you, who speaks your own language, is so underrated. Like, it's so magical in a way. So having Tiana so close to me is so, I literally feel so blessed. And so yeah, so grateful to have someone there always with me, even if she is in Canada, all the way across the world, or Calgary. But yeah, she really does mean the world to me, and I really love it. So having writer friends really does help. So I think if you're a beginner writer, try your best to find someone. And if you're kind of struggling, go check out my Discord. I literally made it for you guys. My Discord is Writing with Anna New. I have it linked in my description always, and just join. You have to be 13 and, find someone there, because that's literally why I created the Discord server. So please, if you're struggling finding a writer friend to be with, to talk with, to just talk out loud with, definitely go to Discord. Okay, last one. The last writing advice I have for my younger writer self is to, sorry, I just kind of like mind blank, is to know that you will grow into your writing, because I honestly still feel like a beginner writer. I still feel like I haven't found my writing, sort of style in a way. And I think it's important to know that you will grow in that, and having ideas and having just simply writing. Like, this also is very much true for my poetry. I used to write poetry, and they would suck, but I'd write it every single day and every single poem would get better and better and better and better. Of course, there's some that really do suck that I like write like so recently. But just remember that like literally if you keep practicing, it will get better. The same way your ideas will get better. If you just write a book, and I guess another one little piece of advice, lastly, is to remember to finish your ideas. Finish your freaking ideas. If you just, like, I have this weird analogy that I always talk about, and it has to do with hair. When I was younger, I used to always love seeing beautiful, like, my classmates who would have beautiful braided hair, and usually their mums would, like, be able to braid their hair and make it all pretty with all these ribbons. Of course, my mom doesn't really braid my hair, so I did it myself. And I would like braid my hair and it would look so terrible because I was learning. But I still wore it to school. I still went to school every single day with new different hairs. I even like did like a Princess Leia vibe where it like went up and down and it was like all the bobby pins were sticking out, but I still went and wore it to school because I finished it and I actually like was like, that's my best I've done. And I think that it's like something like, for example, sharing your art. If you're a drawer, if you're, love drawing, if you just keep not sharing it or not like finishing a project, like if I just did my hair and took it out straight after, there is no room for improvement and respect and also self-confidence within that sort of act. So I think if you just focus on sharing your work, finishing your ideas, even though they seem terrible and you maybe think this isn't worth it, finish them and share them, or at least just tell someone you finished this book. And trust me, as soon as you finish one book, you're set. You're literally set. You're so, far ahead of other people who want to be writers, and I think that's really important to think about. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Sorry if I was like a bit, not emotional, but like motivational. Usually I'm more upbeat. I think it's just because I've been filming like all day that my brain's a little bit crazy. But I literally always love these podcasts because I really do get to talk out loud and just really like say what I want. Like, and you guys listening to me, like that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Anyways, everyone, I love you so, so much. I'll end this episode here before it gets too long. But if you're a beginner writer, definitely just subscribe, Lol, I don't know why I just said subscribe. No, take this advice and check out my channel if you need some more advice. But yeah, I love you guys so much. And again, just remember that writers gonna write. Writers are gonna write. I don't know what else to say, but yeah, I love you guys. I love you guys so much. But I hope to see you in my next writing video. Bye, everyone.